Hey everybody, welcome to DadsDen of Pop Culture and a little role-playing game. Well, we'll call it a deep dive, sort of a read-through of the original Star Frontiers game, Alpha Dawn, a science fiction role-playing game from the producer of the Dungeons and Dragons game. This is one that I got, now, and this is not the original that I owned. I rebought this later on. I got this, I don't know, maybe a couple, 3 years into playing role-playing games. I obviously started with Dungeons and Dragons, the basic expert, then to advanced. And I had Gamma World by this time and had played some Gamma World. But this was, first time going into this kind of sci-fi for me. I had not played Travel or games of that sort. And I think it's actually a pretty neat game. Let's see what the box like that looks like. So let's dive into this guy, see what is inside this here box. We got the basic game rules, and they are pretty darn basic. They give you the basic idea of how the game works. I think the advanced rules are much more, or I should say expanded game rules, are much more worth it. We got some great Larry Elmore art there. Really one of the most striking pieces, I think, you're going to find on a sci-fi role-playing game from the period. We have an adventure, SF0, Crash on Volturnus by Mark Akers and Tom Moldvay with Doug Niles. And this one, kind of like the Marvel superheroes game, does use a map with a grid, especially in the basic set. They use this quite a bit. I think it's something you would probably move away from over time if you were playing a larger campaign, or if you were going for something maybe with a slightly different sci-fi flavor, from what's presented in the book. We do have a couple dice in here. The game does use 2 10-sided dice, and you can see some of these little chits have already been punched out and put in this bag. I guess I could put that little extra guy in there. Maybe we'll take the dice out while we're at it, because those could come in handy as we look at the rules. So we got a bunch of these counters that you would use, obviously, if you were using the map. We got a second map for Starship Bridge area. We got the RPGA little membership thing in there as well. Let's take a closer look at this since we got it out. So there's the bridge of some kind of a starship. Okay. We're going to put a lot of this stuff away and not really focus on it, because what I want to focus on for this video are the expanded game rules. But we will look at one thing here for sure in the basic rules. Put that over to the side without dropping it. Yay, I accomplished it. Okay. So we have the basic game rules and we have the expanded game rules. We're going to go through this book first because it is helpful, even though I think that, the basic game rules are not rules you'd necessarily want to play by. And sometimes, you look at a basic quick start rules, which is what this is. It's not too bad. And, you go, I could actually kind of work with this. I think you'd want the expanded rules for this one. But it does introduce some concepts that we kind of need to figure out. Got some Jeff Easley art there. So the game does give you a sort of background campaign that you can use. It is set in a spiral arm galaxy, not necessarily the Milky Way. These are humans, but they're not Earthlings. Okay, but honestly, you can ignore a lot of that if you were working on your own campaign system. You don't have to use just what they give you here. So you're going to get an introduction to what the game's all about, creating characters, the basic rules, equipment, adventures, the metric system, and glossary, because remember, this is the United States of America. We don't use metric here for the most part, because we don't need no foreign rulers. So Star Frontier Science Fiction, Exciting Adventure on Alien Worlds, copyright 1982 from TSR Hobbies Incorporated. etc., etc., etc. Don't have the credits there. And this is first printing from July of 1982. I don't know if I realized when I bought this it was the first printing. So it gives you this little opening of how an adventure might go. And this is actually an adventure you're going to be, I want to say, I'm trying to think if this is the actual adventure you're going to get in this book. They give you an adventure in this book that's sort of like a choose your own adventure game, which is kind of an interesting concept for walking people through it. So it's about a treacherous double agent, aimed his needler pistol at me as he prepared to escape. I didn't think he could kill me with one shot from the small weapon, but I didn't want to find out. So it's about these two agents, a human and a Vrusk. They're sort of an insectoid species. We're going to be looking at that in just a moment. They're these two agents going after this guy. The idea they kind of give you here is that you're going to be playing these agents of, I want to say you're getting paid kind of like mercenaries almost by the Space Patrol or whatever they're calling it. I have to look. We'll see as we go through. But it sort of gives you an idea of how you can set a game like this up. But again, I think a lot of people buying this game were probably sci-fi fans, and they probably wanted to do something, a campaign world of their own invention and their own making. So what is the game about? Each player in a Star Frontiers game plays a character, either a human or an alien living far in the future. In some ways, characters are like the pieces used in other games, but players in a role-playing game do not simply roll dice and move pieces around on the board. Characters can do anything a real person could do if he was living in a Star Frontiers world. Shoot a laser, drive a skimmer, chase dangerous interstellar criminals, explore alien worlds, or anything else the player wants the character to do. So basically, it's giving you the description of what a role-playing game is. You had to do back then because this concept was still relatively new to people. It tells you how to use the dice. You got the two 10-sided dice. Basically, the dark dice is your 10s. Your light dice is your 1s. And this one would be a 21. And I know I can barely see that that's a 2. These are the dice back in the day that you would use the white crayon on so you could see better what you were rolling. But we'll keep them handy just in case we need to. So now it tells you about creating your characters and how you're going to do that. Each character is going to have 8 abilities that are arrayed in 4 pairs. These are strength, stamina, dexterity, reaction speed, intuition, logic, and personality, leadership. So they basically define the character ability scores. I think most people understand what that means in this day and age. Each of these abilities will have a score from 1 to 100. An ability score of 1 means the character is very poor in that ability, while a score of 100 means the character has very high ability in that area. Players find their ability scores by rolling dice. This is explained under how to create characters. And so then they give you an explanation of the abilities of these different, or what the abilities mean and kind of what they control. Then we get the races. Players can choose to make their characters members of one of 4 races: human, Dralasite, Vrusk, or Yazirian. Humans are similar to Earthmen, but these humans developed on another planet closer to the center of the galaxy. Humans are considered the average characters in Star Frontiers games, so their abilities are not modified when the character is created. In other words, pretty much like Dungeons & Dragons. Dralasites are rubbery, elastic aliens, sometimes called blobs. They can change their shape at will, creating as many artificial arms and legs as they need at the moment. They are stronger than humans, but also slower. They enjoy philosophical debates and have a very strange sense of humor. They love telling old jokes and puns they hear from humans. So they like dad jokes. Dralasites kind of, to me, are like, they're a little bit like dwarves in D&D. And to be honest with you, they are probably the character race that I would have played if I had ever gotten to play, like in a long-term campaign. Me and my friends did play Star Frontiers a few times. I was usually the sort of game master, so I didn't get to really play a character. But yeah, I like that. I like the idea of the Dralasites. Vrusk look like large insects and are sometimes called bugs. They are quicker than humans, but are not as strong. Vrusk are excellent businessmen and merchants. They love art, beauty, and music. Kind of sounds like they're sort of in the elf zone of a fantasy game. Yazirians are tall, light-boned humanoids with furry manes around their necks. Humans nicknamed them monkeys because they look a little like chimpanzees. Thin membranes that stretch between their arms, torso, and legs allowed Yazirians to glide between the trees on their native planet. They are generally smarter and quicker than the other races, but are not as strong. Their eyes are very sensitive to light, and they usually wear dark goggles during the day. Yazirians were very warlike in the past and are still considered pushy and aggressive by other races. And I would say, no, that doesn't really track to a halfling hobbit sort of character. They're kind of their own thing. And this here would be a female Yazirian, to give you an idea. Yeah, they usually have that sort of visor thing on because their eyes are more sensitive to light. So how do we create these characters? Well, you're going to roll the dice 1 to 100, and that's going to give you your starting ability scores. So, for example, for strength, we roll a 35 there. That would come out as a 40. You get the idea. So you're going to have a little character sheet like you would expect. They say you can do it on a blank sheet of paper, or you could, photocopy what they give you. To find a character's strength, stamina, ability score, roll percentile dice. Find the number you rolled on the ability score table. Your base score for that ability is the number listed under the die roll. Write this number in the space marked base score for strength stamina on the character sheet. So we rolled a 40, and it gives you an example here. Dave Schick is creating a Star Frontiers character. To find his character's strength stamina base score, he rolls percentile dice. The result is 53. Checking the ability score table, he sees this gives his character a strength stamina base score of 45. So the 40 that we rolled, we're going to put the 40 in for strength, and we're going to put it in for stamina both. And that's going to be the same for all of these. So you repeat that to get your dexterity, reaction, intuition, logic, personality, and leadership base scores. Decide then which race you want your character to be. Your choice will affect your ability scores as described in step 5. Any number of players can choose the same race for their characters. Groups with characters from several races usually are more successful and more fun to play. Now, this is a game that does not have classes. So the main way to differentiate is going to be the races and to some degree the ability scores and what then you want to do with your character, because there is a skill system in this one. So if I'm a human, I don't do anything to my scores. If I'm a Dralasite, I increase strength and stamina by 5. I reduce the dexterity and reaction by 5 if I decided to play that kind of a character. We then repeat that for all the different ability scores. We then divide reaction score by 10 if the result is a fraction, round it up to the nearest whole number. The final result is the character's initiative modifier. Write it in the space marked IM on the character sheet. For example, Dave Schick's character has a reaction speed of 45, so that would be a 4.5, which would round up to a 5. So that's his initiative modifier. Give your character a name. If your character is an alien, try to give it an alien-sounding name. Like instead of Todd, call it Tid. I don't know. Anyway, so you fill out your little sheet here, and then you get to the basic rules. The map and the playing pieces, it gives you the information on how that stuff works. The game turns. So a turn, let's see, each turn is 6 seconds long, so there are 10 turns to 1 minute. Note that the game time is not the same as real time. It might take several minutes to play a 6 second. Again, that's something they had to explain because this was a new concept for most people. During his turn, a character can do any one of the following things: move, fire a weapon, move and fire a weapon, reload a weapon, stand, and do nothing. Each turn, players must do things in the order listed below. So this is the turn sequence. First, roll the dice to see which side has initiative. All characters on the side with initiative can move. All characters on the side with initiative can attack. Then all characters on the side without initiative can move. Then all characters on the side without initiative can attack. So basically, the winning side goes first, then the other side, but the movement happens before attacking. So you got to do movement, then attack. All right. Players, of course, are not required to move or attack with the character, what you want to do. At the beginning of each turn, one player from each side must roll 1 die 10. The result of this roll is added to the initiative modifier of the character with the highest reaction speed from that side. So in other words, everybody has their own initiative modifier, but we're only going to use the highest modifier to modify that particular roll. So I've always liked the initiative for each side in a battle rather than individual. And the reason I've liked that is because I think it gives the players an easier time of coordinating their characters' efforts together. Because, if everybody's moving separately and the bad guys go in between, it gets a little harder, especially if you have maybe players who are newer to the game or are not real great at tactics. I think it's an advantage. But of course, the problem with that is it doesn't let you use initiative at all. But I think here we're doing side initiative, but the fastest character can actually help his side move maybe before the other one. I kind of dig that. I like that. I think if I was doing some Moldvay Cook D&D, I might adapt that particular rule and use an initiative thing. Well, probably use like the advanced D&D kind of initiative for a high dexterity score. At any rate, so that gives you who goes first. Your movement, and this is done in the map spaces. So the little squares, the little grid, it doesn't give you movement in like meters or feet or yards or anything like that. So movement table, spaces moved per turn for humans, walking 2, running 6. Dralasites are slower. The Vrusk are faster. You get the idea. The Yazirians move like humans do. This is the maximum distance a character can move at that speed. A human, for example, could walk 1 or 2 spaces in a turn, or could run 3, 4, 5, or 6 spaces in a turn. Doesn't have to run 6. That should be pretty obvious, but they like to give you that, they like to spell it out for people just in case. Then you get roads, pedestrian walkways, buildings, parking areas. In other words, things that modify that kind of movement. They tell us here about the monorail. And then because we're doing this kind of for a sample adventure that's set in this futuristic city, some of the rules are tied to that city. But again, if you're doing a Buck Rogers campaign, Star Trek, you might have monorails in cities and stuff like that too. So it would be something that would make sense. They give you rules for the skimmers, which are basically like these levitating cars. They tell you how much rental skimmers cost, underground parking, things like that. They show you how they're going to move on a turn diagram, etc. And then we get to combat. So combat, they're first going to tell you about sighting. And in other words, you got to be able to see something, to shoot at them and that kind of stuff. A character can see his target if a straight line from the center of his square to the center of the target square is not blocked by a building. A building does not block a character's line of sight if the character is in a position where he can lean around the corner to shoot. Monorails, walkways, trees, and other small objects do not block the line of sight. The sighting diagram shows several examples of clear and blocked lines of sight. The combat procedure. Whenever a character fires a weapon at another character or any other target, follow this step-by-step procedure. Count the number of squares in the most direct path from the attacker to the target. Count the square the target is in, but not the square the attacker is in. Check the weapons table for the weapon the attacker is using. The distance in squares from the attacker to the target determines whether the target is at point blank, short, medium long, or extreme range. A target that is beyond extreme range cannot be hit. Here's your weapons table, by the way. Subtract the range modifier for this range from the firing character's dexterity score. The range modifiers are shown in parentheses beneath the ranges. So, say we got a laser pistol. We'll use that. 1 die 10 damage. Point blank is 1 square. Short is 2 to 4. Medium 5 to 10. Long 11 to 20. Extreme 21 to 40. If I'm trying to do an extreme range shot, I subtract 80 from my dexterity. The reality is, for most characters, I'm going to have a dexterity maybe in like probably around a 40, something like that. So extreme range, you're going to have a really high dexterity score to have any hope of making that attack. Short, -10, medium is -20, long is -40. So even the long range shots are going to be pretty difficult to actually pull off. If the firing character was running or riding in a skimmer, subtract 10 from the result from step 3. So step 3 is when you take the range modifier off. If the target has cover, subtract 10 from the result from step 4. This final number is the character's chance to hit. Okay, so I've got a 40 dexterity. I'm trying to make a short range hit with my laser pistol. That's minus 10. So that gives me a 30. I then maybe I'm not in a skimmer, but my target has some cover. I subtract another 10. Now I got a 20. So I have a 20% chance of hitting my target. So I roll my dice and I get a 2 and I get a 9. A 29, that's over 20. That means I missed. If the guy I was shooting at was closer or was not or didn't have any cover, I would have hit him with that one because it would have been a 30. So one or the other, and I would have been okay. So that's a pretty nice way of handling this stuff. If you get down to it, it's just use your dexterity. That's your chance to hit somebody. Take off a couple modifiers, roll the dice, and you're good to go. So then you get some rules for grenade bounces with these little tables to show, grenade hits and then it goes somewhere else. How far does it bounce it based on whether it was short, medium, long, or extreme range? If you're throwing extreme range, that bounce is going to be pretty big. And who knows where that grenade is going to actually end up. Automatic hits, a roll of 1 to 5 always is a hit regardless of modifiers, if the target is visible and in range. For example, if a character with the dexterity score of yada, 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 let's say his chance to hit is negative 45. However, if the character rolls a 1 to 5 on percentile dice, he fits the target anyways. So that's how you could maybe hit something at extreme range if your dexterity isn't high enough, but it does still have to be in range. So that 80 squares the laser rifle can fire, right? 81 squares, no, it's beyond range. You're not going to be able to hit it no matter what. Then we get cover. It kind of explains how that's going to work and what counts as cover. Vehicles, and they mentioned that in the other thing. They really do. I mean, you could probably have cut this down a little bit, but they really do try to make sure people understand what they're doing. By 82, they're selling D&D like in the Sears catalog. A lot more kids are starting to play the game, right? Like you see in Stranger Things. And of course, they want the kids to maybe be buying Star Frontiers, which, by the way, I mean, with Star Wars and all the sci-fi out there, that, there was a lot more sci-fi out there for kids to watch than there was fantasy back in the day. So that makes sense. You're going to try to get these kids into a sci-fi game. But you want to make sure they're going to understand the game. I mean, look at all this writing. It's already going to be a game, let's be honest, for the nerdier kids, the kids who are willing to sit and read all of these rules. But they did want to make sure that they were understandable for them so they could get into the game and have a good time. So then we get damage. When a shot hits its target, the firing character must roll dice to see how badly the target is injured. The weapons table lists how many dice of damage each weapon causes. We noted that the laser pistol does 1d10, for example. Damage caused by weapons is subtracted from the target character's stamina. When a character's stamina is reduced to 0 or less, the character is unconscious. An unconscious character cannot move or fire for the rest of the game. The character will die unless given a stay dose injection. See first aid pack. So that's something later. So our stamina is basically our hit points, kind of similar to what you do with your Constitution score was it called I think it was Constitution in Gamma World. Again, this is not a class system, so you don't have levels and you don't have hit dice based on levels. So they had to work on something different. Those grenades, of course, are going to be, putting people to sleep. You get the idea. Tells you about how the ammunition works for these weapons. We get recovering stamina. A wounded character can recover 10 points of stamina by giving himself a stim dose injection with the spray hypo from his first aid pack. The effects of a stim dose is temporary. After 3 hours, the 10 points are lost, and the character must rest without moving for 24 hours. A stim dose will not help a character whose stamina has been reduced below 0. It will not raise a character's current stamina above his original stamina. So it's kind of like, a healing potion for D&D. But again, temporary. That could be interesting with healing potions in Dungeons & Dragons. What if those were just temporary? They just kept you going long enough to get you out of there alive. equipment. So we get a standard equipment pack in this, which includes a chronograph communicator, in other words, a, wrist radio watch, coveralls, dose grenade, first aid pack. There's your stim dose. Let's see. They actually tell you the whole thing here. Again, what they just told you up there. So again, they like to repeat stuff. I guess it just gives you maybe only have one dose of that in your pack. You got stay dose, which puts a character to sleep for 24 hours, slows down his heartbeat and breathing, and helps stop bleeding. If a character's stamina has been reduced to 0 or less, a stay dose injection must be given in 10 turns and will keep the character alive until he is taken to a hospital. You have an ID card. It is the future, unfortunately, and there is sort of, in most sci-fi, there's always that sort of big brother aspect to things, if you notice. You get a pocket tool, which seems like it's kind of like a pocket knife or a Swiss Army knife. Survival rations, enough for 5 days. Weapons. Weapons usually are assigned to characters at the start of a mission by their employers based on what sort of mission they are undertaking. You got dose grenades, gyrojet pistols, laser rifles, needler pistols. Those are the things that guy in the little opening story had. You get money. Standard currency in Star Frontiers game is the credit, abbreviated CR. Prices for common items are shown below, which, by the way, does include hospital healing, 1 credit per point. So if you've lost 20 stamina, and remember, the stim dose will give you temporary stamina. You won't get it back without resting in a hospital. That's going to cost you 20 credits to get your stamina back up. Now, obviously, and maybe in the expanded rules we'll see this, there should be other ways to gain some of your health back. I mean, it seems obvious, but I guess, if people are getting hit with bullets and with lasers and everything else, maybe they would absolutely have to have medical attention to get that stamina back. I guess it could sort of be permanent. But so you get the little cost table here. And because some of the costs are so high, that's why they're saying your employer is going to just give you these weapons at the beginning of a mission. And then you get the stuff about adventures here and, what players do. Adventure 1, Pan-Galactic Security Breach, tells you the purpose of your mission, tells you the team, how that's going to work, it tells you how to play it, tells you how to win, tells you what the setup is, and here's the adventure. And like I said, this adventure is done sort of in the style of a choose-your-own-adventure, okay? So I'll read the start for you. You have met in the security service building to discuss your new assignment and talk to some PGC experts about why the security at the research centers failed. You are in the main computer room where data collection and analysis is handled. The chief of security and the head programmer, both humans, are helping you. Also in the room are 4 technicians, one of each different race. The programmer shows you a small computer cabinet containing thousands of crystal wafers. The security information and command controls for all Pan-Galactic's research centers are stored here, he says. We ran a thorough check of all the systems and couldn't find anything wrong. There is no way the raiders could have broken in. The programmer-in-chief seemed puzzled. And here it says, what are you going to do? Wait for the raiders to strike again. Read 01. That's this. Investigate the site of the last attack. Read 02. Ask the computer if there is a pattern in the raiders' attacks. Read 03. So there's 02. So that's kind of how this works. And when it gets to certain places, it tells you, okay, here's where you're going to have to do a combat. So here's who's facing you. Here's what you got. It gives you here are the raiders and the weapons that they have and their basic ability scores. Pretty much at this point, you're going to treat them the same way as you would a PC in terms of their ability scores. They don't have monster stats. So you work your way through this sample adventure until you get to the end. And it gives you creature information for a creature, I believe, that shows up in that. This is for readers' eyes only. So I guess the reader is the person kind of running the adventure. So here's the Hydra. You can see it's obviously, the name's inspired by the fantasy Hydra, but it's not a fantasy Hydra. Gives you their creature abilities. Their initiative modifier is 5. Dex is 40. This is for they fire nematocysts, muscle-fired darts from its mouth. So it tells you the point blank, the short, etc., extreme range. Tells you the movement etc. Oh, I'm sorry. The Hydra starts with 30 stamina points per player character. Thus, if there are 3 characters, it will have a stamina of 90. So they kind of give you what you need to know so you can fight this thing off. They're going to have more traditional monster ability type, stats in the expanded rules. So they give you stuff for designing your own creatures here, which is pretty cool. They give you creating your own adventures. So kind of here's the different things you need to figure out. Again, very useful for people who are just starting out with these kind of things. Gives you some information on some monsters down here. And here it tells you about the metric system, so you understand what these things mean. I think pretty much if you just stick with meters, you're pretty good. And honestly, you could play this thing with feet and yards. It wouldn't ruin the game. It would all work out well enough. They're not so different that you couldn't play it that way. So there you go. That is the basic rules. And here's that ability sheet that you can use. You could beg mom to take you somewhere that has a copying machine so that you could copy it out. And that then takes us to the expanded game rules. And if you were anything like I was when I was a kid, you probably would have gone to the expanded rules before you ever even tried the basic ones out. So what do they expand in this? Well, they give you expanded character generation rules. It works more or less like it does in the other one, but it does let you modify your abilities a little bit. So, for example, so players can now modify their ability scores by subtracting points from one ability and adding them to the other ability in that pair. No more than 10 points can be shifted this way. Example, a character has a strength stamina base score of 50-50. The player decides he wants his character to be very strong. He can increase the character's strength score to 60 if he reduces the stamina score to 40. Okay, so you get a little bit more, crunchy in your character generation, but not a ton. Now the non-human characters also have some special abilities. Dralasites have a 5% lie detection and elasticity. Vrusks have 15% comprehension and ambidexterity. Yazirians have 5% battle rage, gliding, and night vision. If the character is a human or Yazirian, decide whether he is right or left-handed. Dralasites and Vrusk do not choose handedness. See their racial descriptions for more information. Decide whether the character is male or female, unless it is a Dralasite, because they just don't roll that way. Roll die 100 and add the result to 250. The final result is the number of credits the character has at the start of the game. And so since the credits are how you get your essentially hit points back, something you'd have to think about when you're doing your character, buying equipment or what have you is, I want to keep some money aside so that I can heal up after a campaign, because I might not be able to heal up all that easily. So that's definitely something you'd want to keep in mind. Now, in this game, you get ability checks. So, we used that in D&D when we were kids. You just kind of came up with it almost on your own, of the idea of, well, you're trying to do something dexterous, roll die 20 under your dexterity. And that's kind of what this is too. Player rolls die 100, and if the result is equal to or less than the ability score the referee chose, then the character succeeded at whatever he was trying to do. And obviously, you could throw in, modifiers as the referee thinks right. There are secret checks. So, it's just like when you're having a thief roll to find traps, a lot of times the DM will make that roll for him so that he doesn't know if he succeeded or failed on the roll. If he succeeds, he'll know, yes, you found traps. But if you tell him he didn't find traps, it might mean there was no trap, or you didn't find the trap. And then the character has to decide whether they want to go for it. So sometimes you do secret ones. It tells you a little bit about that. All eight character abilities are listed below, along with the typical actions that would require an ability check against that ability. So they give you the idea of how all that stuff is going to work. Very nice. You can improve characters, increase their ability scores and racial abilities, and gain skills through adventuring. Basically, you gain experience points as you adventure, right? You can then increase their character's ability scores by trading one experience point to raise an ability score 1 point. no ability score can ever be raised above 100. Certain racial abilities, lie detection, etc., can also be increased by trading 1 experience point to increase the ability 1 point. They cannot be raised above 100. And then there are the skills. Characters can learn skills which allow them to perform special actions. Each skill has 6 levels of expertise. A character can raise his skill levels by spending experience points. And that depends on the skill, and those are described in a separate section. So then we get a more in-depth look at the different character races in the game. Physical appearance and structure, senses, speech, society and customs, attitudes, special abilities. Tells you how the elasticity will work for a Drallasite, and the lie detection. I just remember being kind of obsessed just with this image of the Dralasite and what it looks like inside of it. I don't know. The Dralasites really captured my imagination when we played this game. But you see the human organs, etc. Like, I didn't know that already. There's the Vrusk. There's the Yazirians. Tells you how their gliding works. Tells you how the battle rage works. Basically, a Berserk Yazirian gets a bonus of plus 20 to hit in melee. Yazirian characters start with a battle rage score of 5 and a 5% chance to go Berserk at the start of a battle. So you get to, as a character, decide if you want to do that. And then we get the Sathar. The Sathar are the main bad guy aliens they give you in this game. They're sort of worm-like characters. I always thought it was funny that you have the little pins in the open. So it does actually look like this is a real Sathar who's been sort of opened up for scientific study. Here we have what they look like when they're standing. Rather goofy little dudes. But you know what? Sometimes taking out player characters with goofy-looking enemies is very, very satisfying for a referee. So now we get the skill section. There are 13 different skills that player characters can learn. These 13 skills are organized into 3 primary skill areas, PSAs: military, technological, and biosocial. And so basically, at the start of a game, each character chooses one primary skill area as his career. So it's a little bit like having a character class, but it's not done with levels and hit dice and all of that kind of stuff. But if you choose, for example, military, then you buy military skills at a cheaper rate than other characters do, likewise technological, etc. So a level 1 military skill would cost 3 XP for for somebody who's in the military primary skill area, 6 for everybody else. It's basically double if you're not in it. And then you can spend additional XP to go up to the next level in that skill. Get the idea. And obviously XP are not handed out in the high amounts that they would be in a Dungeons & Dragons game. So, that's why 1 XP per ability score point or 3 XP to get a military skill. The XP are a little more judiciously handed out. They're worth more, I'll put it that way. So each sub-skill has a success rate. The success rate consists of a basic chance to succeed plus modifiers for the character's skill level. If the success rate for a sub-skill is 40% plus skill level, then the character's chance to use the sub-skill successfully is 40% plus 10 times his skill level. All right. So what do we got? We got military skills. Under military skills, we have weapons skills, which have a success rate of 1/2 dexterity plus the skill level. Okay. And I believe you break this down into beam weapons, gyrojet weapons, melee weapons, projectile weapons, and thrown weapons. Essentially, by taking these skills, you get a better chance to hit in combat. You got martial arts, so that would be, fighting unarmed. Under technological skills, you have computer skill, and it gives you the different operations under that. Operating computers, writing programs, defeating security, bypassing security, displaying information, manipulating programs, interfacing computers, repairing computers. You then have a robotics skill. There are different levels of robots, which, is how complex they are. You can identify, add equipment, repair robots, etc. Boop, 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 boop. And then you got the technician skill. There are 5 technician subskills: operate machinery, repair, detect alarm defense, deactivate alarm defense, and open locks. Sounds a little bit like a thief in Dungeons and Dragons, so you get an idea, if you wanted to sort of work that way. And by the way, you could probably take this skill concept. Oh, by the way, look, this is Larry Elmore doing this. That looks an awful lot like a robot that showed up in a comic strip he did called Snarf. I like that. I don't know if that was intentional. It might well have been intentional. But you get the idea that you could take this skill concept and port it over to something like basic D&D or even advanced D&D for a skill system. Instead of percentile, you'd base it on die 20 rolls. So take all the percentile stuff, divide it by 5, and it would work on a die 20. You get the basic idea. But it's a pretty nice, neat way to do things. It doesn't overload you with skills. The skills that you take have a lot of different applications, so that's good with different success rates. You then have the biosocial skills. Environmental skill deals with relationships between intelligent life and nature. You got, what's in there? Analyzing ecosystems, finding directions, survival, making tools, weapons, tracking, stealth, concealment, naming. All right, so you want to be sort of like a ranger. You want to be sort of like a scout. You want to take that biosocial environmental skill. There's medical skill. Damn it, Jim. I'm a surgeon, not a forklift. You got psychosocial skill. So that's like what your bard would basically have. Empathy, communication, hypnosis, like sci-fi, classic sci-fi. You got to have hypnosis in there. Psychopathology, etc. I think it's a really, really nice, neat, simple system for making the characters, more unique, giving them very, very useful skills that are going to be used in just about any kind of sci-fi adventure, and, without a lot of complexity behind it. Not tons of modifiers that you have to remember. There are some, but not a ton of modifiers. You could write most of this stuff down on your character sheet, and you notice you have the racial abilities here. Yeah, you might need a different sheet for that, but we record skills and equipment on the reverse side. So there you go. You could write these things down on your character sheet with, what your basic chance of success is, and refer to it in the game, and it would not take up a massive amount of time to do. We then get a section on movement. And the art in this is really, really, really good. So movement table, remember before it was squares? Now it breaks it down into meters. So a Dralasite can walk 5 meters per turn, run 20 meters per turn, or 3 kilometers per hour. Okay. The fastest are the Vrusks still. The Sathar are about, they're close to human. They're a little slower than human beings are. They did have silly little legs, so you kind of understand why that would work. Tells you about endurance, how long you can go at top speed. Breaks it down by terrain modifiers, the terrain effect table, etc. Encumbrance. Wounds. Oh, so here we go. Stacking. Oh, that's if you're using the squares. A character can stand in a space 1 meter square. This means a map square that is 5 meters across can hold up to 25 characters. Okay. So wounds. A character whose current stamina is 1/2 or less of his full stamina can move only at half speed, and his carrying capacity is cut in half. And it tells you how to work with mixed parties when people have different speed levels, etc. You get expanded combat here. Again, it does not make the combat super complex, but it does give you a little bit more with like the ranged weapons combat procedure. Really spells everything out and gives you all of the modifiers that you're going to need while you're doing it. Target size modifiers, cover modifiers, etc. So it's kind of nice. You just photocopy that one, square right here, and you have what you need to know about ranged weapons. I love this. I love this one of the Dralasite. Why does it sort of remind me of Ben Grimm in a way? I know it doesn't really look like Ben Grimm, but it has a lot of Ben Grimm energy. Look at that dude. Did he get knocked into the sand like that, or what? I suppose he probably did. I'm wondering if that punch knocked that dude into this little divot and took the other dude flying. But I really love that shot. It's one of the things that made me want to play like a Drallasite character. Here's your grenade bouncing diagrams. Gives you all the stuff you need on explosives. And then you get the melee procedure. Same basic idea. You get these two squares, you got everything that you need to know to do it. And it primarily comes down to just there are more modifiers to be thought of when you're in the middle of a combat. It gives you also some special actions, wrestling, disarming, defending, tells you how battle rage works, tells you how the skills that apply in melee, martial arts, and melee weapons. These are explained in the skills section. Number of attackers. You can be attacked by up to 3 opponents at once if the opponents are the same size as the character. Guns. A character involved in melee can shoot a pistol at an opponent that is in melee with them, but cannot shoot at anyone that is not involved in the melee. So you can't be fighting somebody and shooting somebody far away. You got to just do it with the guy that you're right next to. Fighting animals and robots gives you what you need to know. Here's your melee weapons table. And this is your ranged weapons table. And you notice that it really does focus more on ranged weapons than on melee in this game because it's sci-fi, laser pistols, etc. By the way, that looks a little bit like maybe laser type swords with that little, explosion there from when they hit each other. You gotta have laser swords. You gotta have laser swords at this point in time. We are post Star Wars, so you gotta have something like that. And in fact, what we have for weapons, we do have electric swords, shock gloves, sonic knife, sonic sword, which I want to say are in Gamma World as well. It would be interesting to see how well you convert this to Gamma World. You have stun sticks and you have vibro knives. So those might be electrical swords that they're using. And that's why they're giving off sparks when they hit. So damage. And it tells you how it reduces your stamina. Shock and unconsciousness. Whenever the roll to hit in combat is 1 or 2, 01, 02, the target is immediately knocked unconscious for die 100 turns. Stim dose can awaken the character sooner. Variable power settings for how much damage you do with laser type weapons. Burns. Characters can avoid or reduce the effects of some weapons by leaping or twisting away. It's kind of like a saving throw when you get right down to it. Different kind of defenses that are available. Albedo suit, albedo screen, skein suit, inertia screen, gauze screen, sonic screen, recovering wounds. So here we go. Here's where you probably needed to add a little bit more. Wounds heal naturally at a rate of 1 point for every 20 hours the wounded character spends resting. Okay? That's kind of slow. So that's why you do want to maybe be able to get that going a little bit faster. Resting means doing nothing more strenuous than taking short walks. A hospital can heal up to 20 stamina points per day at a cost of 1 credit per stamina point healed, plus 50 credits per day. Expensive. Biocortisone is a healing drug. An injection of Biocort heals 10 points of damage immediately when it is given by a medic. It has no effect if given by a non-medic, so don't even try. Field surgery, stim dose, etc. Okay. And there's life-saving drugs and equipment. You get vehicles and vehicle combat with vehicle movement. We won't go deeply into all of that kind of stuff, but you can see it's only a couple pages, of here's the stats for the vehicles. Here's the ground vehicle movement. It's not a ton, which keeps it pretty darn simple, which is why I think this would be a fun game. And by the way, in the middle, and you could probably take this out and use it outside of the book, because you notice it's right in the center. Raise the staples, pull it out, put the staples back down. We always used to do that a lot in the back in the day, but it gives you all of the tables that you need. So you could also see how those would pretty easily fit on a sort of referee screen for this. So here's the rest of the vehicle combat stuff with crashing and all that kind of stuff. You get the flying you're going to need. You're definitely going to need flying for a sci-fi game. Tells you how various vehicles like in the city work, monorails, cabs, moving walkways, Jetsons, you got to have moving walkways. Creating creatures. What is their purpose? What type of creature is it? So it works you through the thinking process of making alien creatures. Gives you the summary right here for the different steps. But of course, it also gives you a bunch of sample creatures that you can use. Strangler shoots, army rats, funnel worms, Megasaurus. It's a cool one. It's fun. So for each of these different monsters, you have the type, large herbivore, number, move. There's the initiative modifier, reaction speed, the stamina, the attack, the damage that they do, special attack, special defense, native world. And that kind of works into the little setting that they give you. Of course, you could, change that setting if you wanted to. So pretty simple stat block for each of these different monsters. Land whales, the slither, which is a Sathar attack monster, sand sharks, winged rippers, Queequeg, real interesting. It shoots like harpoons, I think, which is why they gave it that. Tomar's horses. They look sort of like a cross between a horse and a dog. They don't give you a ton, but they give you just enough. And they give you the ability to make them yourself so you can, custom make the alien creatures for your particular campaign. Which makes sense because, in a D&D fantasy world, right? Yeah, all the monsters are going to be available in that particular fantasy world. That's just sort of how it works. Here, you're talking about all sorts of different alien worlds. So if we give you 100 different alien creatures to play with, where are they native to? Where are you actually going to likely find them? It may not work that well if you're going from planet to planet doing different adventures. So give people the ability to make the monsters, make it relatively simple, and then they can make them themselves to populate different alien worlds. And of course, for the particular adventures you're doing, you don't necessarily need to know all the ecosystems, all the creatures on a particular alien world. Think of Luke on Dagobah, right? Goes to Dagobah. He's in one particular area with Yoda. There's the thing that lives in the swamp water. You see some of the little birds or winged reptiles flying by, etc. You don't need to create tons of different alien creatures for the Dagobah portion of his adventure. And it could work that way with your characters as well. Maybe they come back to that planet later, and then you want to detail some more stuff. But right off the bat, you only need maybe one or two good creatures to make the thing work. Here's all the equipment. We get weapon descriptions, so they get a little bit more into the weapons for you here, including stuff like axe and brass knuckles, which most people would probably kind of figure out on their own. This is nice. Here we have the medics working on these folks after a crash of their spaceship. I like the Dralasite. Looks like he's maybe got like a spacesuit on of some kind there. His head might be exposed, but maybe not. Any rate, again, great art in this thing. So here's the toolkits that are going to go with the skill sets. Very nice. Computer programs. So you get more on robots and creating robots, not only for a character creating the robot, but also for the referee who's going to be creating robots to encounter the characters. You get all the miscellaneous equipment here. Sun goggles. Like I said, the Yazirians need that because they're, affected by light. Tornadium D19, which notice Kaboomite, which sounds an awful lot like what Marvin the Martian was using. I'm sure that's what that reference is. Vitasalt pills, gas masks, holoflares, exoskeletons, Everflame as a permanent waterproof, windproof lighter guaranteed to last 20 years, anti-shock implant, etc. All this different stuff that you could eventually buy and put into use in some of your adventures. Frontier societies. So it tells you about the frontier worlds and the frontier map. And let's see, here we go. So this is the sort of standard setting they give you for the game. this is the star frontier that you'll be exploring. You got star systems uninhabited, unexplored is like just an open circle. Okay, you see a couple of those. Yazirians are the primary colonists. Oops, I bumped that a little bit. Sorry. Yazirians are the primary colonists if it has a Y in the circle. So Screefron, Arax, Athor, Grunagaru are all where the Yazirians live. Humans are the primary colonists wherever there is an H. Oh, there we go. White Light, Theseus, Timion, Matterly Star. Those are all human areas. Mixed groups, if there's a star. So Pringlar, Truane Star, Cassidine. Those are all mixed groups living there. The Vrusks are in Kizkar and Kakinkar and Katsakar. So they got kind of a thing going. Fromeltar is for the Dralasites. I think that might be the only one where I see a D. Yeah. Neutron stars are marked with a cross. There's binary stars. So that little thing right there, it's a circle and a circle. That's a binary star. So you could figure those out yourself. Now Dixon's star looks like it's unexplored and uninhabited, as is Zebulon, which is of course named for Zeb Cook. Okay. So it basically then gives you, with that map, it explains what some of these things are, how you move between the different systems, etc. Like for example, here we go. The frontier worlds. The system is Aurochs. The planet is Hints. The color yellow, so it's a yellow star. So Superman would have powers there. The HI population. That's where you got to go to the. H is for heavy population. I is for industrial. So it's got a heavy industrial population on the planet. The gravity, the moons, the length of days, and the star yellow, orange, orange, yellow. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, the colony. Sorry. COL is the colony. Yazirians. I got that wrong. So there you go. It gives you that little idea. So now you don't have to play in this, but you certainly can. There's nothing stopping you. But it also gives you an idea of maybe how to draw up a star frontier of your own. Again, if you want to do something like, Star Trek or Star Wars, you could adapt that to what this thing is. There we have some space people trading with some primitive folk on some planet, giving them, some kind of, I don't know what the heck that thing's supposed to do. Maybe it's a fan. They're kind of looking at it going, okay. As a matter of fact, I think he bit the top off of it. It gives you Galactic Standard Time, that concept. 1 year in Galactic Standard Time is 8,000 hours long. A standard year is divided into 420-hour days, if you need that kind of stuff. Languages, pan-galactic, alien languages, learning new languages, etc. The cost of living. And then you get the typical how to referee stuff. So it gives you the rundown on how to run the game. Very useful stuff. That's a nice one. Looks like this gang is going to take out that guard, or so they think. Information on NPC reactions, how to conduct combat. Gives you an example of play. Gives you some stuff on experience points and how you hand those out, which would be very important in the game, since that's how you get better at things. How to create an adventure. Essentially, like what they have in the basic rules, although it gets a little bit more in depth for you. Here we get some nice maps. Your basic hex map. You'd notice same trees and stuff that you're going to find in the expert set, I think. That looks like a spaceship that maybe has crashed into the ground. Part of it maybe is in a cave. Non-player characters, how to create them. Here's some average ability scores for the different races if you just want to grab the averages and not have to roll it out for everybody. Racial reaction modifiers. So let's see. For humans, humans get a -10 with the Vrusk, a -5 with the Yazirians, and a -20 with the Sathar. The Sathar don't like anybody except other Sathar. Dralasites get a +10 with other Dralasites, a +5 with Vrusk. So Dralasites, actually, pretty popular there. The Vrusk get a -5 with humans, so they dislike us more than we dislike them. I wonder if there's a little bit of a human Vulcan thing going there. Yazirians, mostly negative because they're very aggressive and pushy. So be a Dralasite and everybody will love you. NPC wages, loyalty of NPCs. You get the idea. Okay. That is Star Frontiers, Alpha Dawn, a really nice set of sci-fi rules. It is not a complex game. I think because it's not complex, it should be relatively easy to adapt to other settings. Also relatively easy to put in, your own stuff. You maybe come up with some other skills. For example, if you wanted to do something like the Jedi and the Force, that could be a fourth, primary skill area with different things in it that you could then try to increase your ability in, or the rules that you need to use for those. That's one of the nice things about a relatively rules light game. And this is pretty rules light. It's got a very simple mechanism for combat. Roll percentile dice under a number. It has a very simple mechanism for skills. Roll percentile dice under a number. What number? Well, it's based on this, and you modify it with this. But there's not a massive number of modifiers. I think, like I said, my friends and I played this a little bit. We probably played D&D and Gamma World more. But if we had played a lot of Star Frontiers, I think we would have memorized most of those modifiers over time. There's not so many of them that they would have just blown your mind. So nice, easy systems means it's easy to modify the game. And because it's easy to understand how things work and what the chances are for things to succeed on average, you could put new things in and keep everything relatively balanced. When you have a really complex system, it's harder to do that. It's harder to play with the thing without breaking it. This seems like a pretty robust system. I don't think you'd have too much difficulty in coming up for the racial stats of a Wookiee or a Vulcan or, a xenomorph if you want to do that as a monster. And I think you could probably adapt a lot of the Gamma World stuff in here without much trouble. Now, D&D might be a little bit tougher to do that transference because you're looking at a system that's like die 20 based versus die percentile. So they're a little bit different. But again, die 20 multiply by 5 to get to die 100. You could probably do it pretty easily. For example, if you have, I don't know, a Minotaur. Let's take an ogre, because ogres I remember they're 4-hit dice, right? So 4-hit dice, if you're using die 8, that's 4.5 times 4, which is what, 16, about an 18. Okay. So 18 hit points, maybe multiply that by 5, or maybe not even by that much to get what the stamina would be for an ogre. You play with it a little bit, but I think you could get there. It's kind of too bad that they didn't do something that was more readily compatible with D&D. In the Dungeon Master's Guide, you do get some information on like how to convert D&D to Gamma World, how to convert it to Boot Hill, and play between those systems. You don't get that with Star Frontiers. Would have been nice. And, there could be a Dragon Magazine article about that I just don't remember. It's entirely possible. But again, that's a fantasy system. I think being able to convert Star Frontiers and Gamma World would maybe be more useful, honestly, since they're both ostensibly sci-fi settings. So there you go, folks. Star Frontiers. Is this a game that you played when you were a kid? Love to hear what your experiences were with it. I think it's a really neat system. Nice and simple, easy to learn, very adaptable, easy to modify. And I think, when you're a kid in the 80s, you're watching a lot of sci-fi. Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica, Star Trek, both the series, the old series and the movies are coming in. Buck Rogers, you name it. There's a ton of sci-fi to fire your imagination. And I think I can just picture using these rules for all of those settings with pretty minimal work at adapting it. But let me know what you think in the comments. I would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this little look at this little, I guess maybe you call it a retrospective of the Star Frontiers game. Please give the video a like and maybe think of subscribing to the channel, sharing with a friend. We go over role-playing games from time to time, also board games, also comic books, also normal books, also movies, also TV, and I don't know, maybe something else in there that I've forgotten. Basically, I try to review pop culture that I like, and I do like Star Frontiers. So, until next time, folks, God bless everybody. Please be kind to one another. Have a little bit of fun out there. And I will see you hopefully again soon in Dad's Den of Pop Culture. Bye-bye.